Hayden and Tom of the Wild Beasts, thanks very much for coming in. I want to begin by just talking about the Mercury Prize and what you felt when you knew that you were nominated for the award.
I think initially it was a massive sense of relief.
Relief?
Yeah, relief. You know, that that what you feel is worthy of acknowledgement has been acknowledged, and that your hard work has, in a way, a safety net. That's what it provided for us pretty quickly, was whatever happens from now on, this record has achieved that.
Right.
So, yeah, it was relief, mostly.
Okay, but prior to that, was it not getting a certain amount of acknowledgement and good reviews and positive feedback?
It was actually, this record was.
Yeah.
We felt like a little bit, certainly in the first record, like we were banging our head against a brick wall a bit, as if like people weren't, it was kind of falling on deaf ears, and the second one seemed to something seemed to invisibly shift, and I think this was kind of the final result of all that. You know what I mean? This kind of like sudden badge of legitimacy, like being invited in to the club.
Is it a good thing to belong to that kind of club in a way, because it sort of involves you in a let's face it, a kind of competition immediately. You're now involved in a competition. And also there's a kind of obedience about this kind of thing that to me contradicts the nature of your group, if you like. You know, and I've just wondered how that feels, that on one hand, yes, attention, legitimacy, but on the other hand, fixed. You know, and whatever the description will be of you within that list. Are you the eccentric nomination? Are you the outside? You know, do you know what I mean? It almost becomes like a sporting event. I just wonder how that feels to your psyche, whether that interferes with the DNA of how you might be developing organically.
It's very easy to kind of shoo all that away, because as if they're like kind of not legitimate fans because they have a bit of power as well. You got to be careful not to be kind of an inverted snob about it as well.
Yeah.
It's true.
And when you were nominated, did you look at the other people? Did you decide where you were within that? I mean, it explicitly makes clear something that's always been in this kind of music, I guess, but was never so obvious, that it's competition. You're in competition for all sorts of things, especially now when there's so much music. And did you immediately start checking out your competition?
I mean, I think a half, if not more, of the list we would have probably predicted anyway. You know, and I think we definitely do occupy the left field end of it. You know, and there's that whole element of us versus Dizzy Rascal. You know, that's the most ridiculous matchup, isn't it? You know, I say this a few times, but it is a David and Goliath scenario. That if Dizzy Rascal, already with one Mercury win and 4 #1 singles behind him, wins it, then it'd be a hell of a lot different than for him than if we win it. And it's sort of like that. It would be a life-changing scenario for us, I think, in a way that it wouldn't be for him.
Right.
But that's part of the beauty of it, I think.
But life-changing, that's interesting, because occasionally an outsider, shall we say, wins the Mercury Prize, and it's not necessarily a good thing.
No.
Because it leads to sort of expectations, and the kind of people that look at these things to find out about new music might go and hear you and listen to you and think, ah!
Yeah.
And it might be a repeat of everything you got when you released your first album to an extent, which had a similar response, because it was so, a lot of people, But on the other hand, is that something you expect? Because if you need to break into the mainstream, you need to keep going through these kind of barriers, and the Mercury, in a way, I guess, is a metaphor for that kind of development of your career, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we realised the power of the Mercury until we were nominated, you know, and we didn't realise how much people care about it until we were nominated. And the amount...
And so how did you notice that? How did that
just the amount of goodwill and how people talk about it in such an impassioned way, you know, as if they really, really care.
And what do you think that's about? Why do you think that it causes such passion?
Well, I think it's the same thing we're talking about being the kind of left field choice and being kind of an underdog and being this kind of... going from being this like cute little indie band from the north with a chip on your shoulder to suddenly being like, to suddenly be on the Mercury list is, I think people kind of relate to that, you know. That sounds a bit grandiose, but you know what I mean, that feeling that like we're not the obvious choice, you know. And I think people like to people always give you the benefit of the doubt, you know what I mean. And because we're kind of doing it for us, you know, we're kind of doing things on a very kind of low level compared to a lot of the stuff on the list. I think maybe we get the kind of goodwill because of that.
Well, I think another thing is there isn't really an equivalent of the Mercury globally, you know. Like people in America, friends of ours, people who we work with, take a lot of notice of it because they don't really have an equivalent. So in that sense, I think people who care about music in this country want the Mercury to say, this is where British music is at.
Yeah.
This is what we have to say is the best record this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that sense, it's important for people that it is a positive statement about British music.
Yeah.
This is where we're at.
Yeah. And do you think it functions as that? Do you think it functions as, I mean, it's, you know, sometimes I in the late of night I can get very grumpy about it, but you know, and say, oh God Almighty, well, the things that are missing, how ridiculous is it? You know, it's a daft bit of ridiculous pretend red carpet. But on the other hand, it's probably better than some of the alternatives, I guess, for saying, you know what, there's an incredible widespread, you know, a variety of music in this country. And it's one of the few chances you might get in the mainstream to hear it.
It's almost like a fast track. I think I always think of records like Anthony's that won it. There's no way he would ever have found such a big audience so quickly, because his music takes time, and it's an endurance test. It's something you have to buy into and believe in him and what he stands for. And I think that goes for a lot of artists nowadays who never really get the chance to sort of be stable and maintain a trajectory, you know, because it is so cutthroat.
I mean, did you feel when you finished the first album that you were just like walking to the pop charts? Did you feel like you just, you know, created, or did you have a fair idea that you know, that it might be a little over the top?
We did have a fair idea, I think. Because we put out a single first on Domino from, you know, it wasn't going to go on the album, it was done in the same sessions. And that was, we thought, oh, this is great, you know, this is exactly how we wanted it to be. And it felt like people were just confused by it. People were bringing up names like Mika and Queen. We were just like, what? I couldn't believe what I was reading, you know.
Did that hurt you?
Well, it was a, yeah, well, at the time, yeah. I mean, now I wouldn't give a shit. But, you know, at the time,
what names were you hoping for, if
well,
any?
I mean, what we were, I don't know, I guess sort of the music we were making was, I mean, stuff we were listening to was a million miles removed from that. It was...
Consider the second album almost like a first album, and also a kind of correction in a way to that initial hysteria and overexcitement.
Yeah, it's the yang to the yin, definitely, that we were sort of more composed, more adult about it, more accepting of ourselves and the world around us, I suppose. Like Tom was saying about the tour that we did, and there were several after that as well, you know.
Yeah.
And in a way, it became this, you know, the superficial joys of it sort of became irrelevant, and it was just the beauty of playing together and playing a show for 5 people or 10 people, because it doesn't matter who you're playing to, you know. And I think that the second record was definitely a product of that sort of very personal joy, you know.
And what is it that motivates young people like you now to want to go into this crowded world and try and recreate a set of circumstances that in a way are very vinyl age and very 20th century and are kind of in some senses are over? This idea of making a collection of songs that fits together as an album, to some extent this is gone.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's an incredible amount of people at the moment like yourselves that seem very loyal and very faithful to this idea.
Well, I think because I don't think an album is entirely an invention. I don't think it's an arbitrary thing. I think it gives people more space to achieve certain things. I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, I think a good 3-minute single is a great thing, but there's only so much you can do with it, you know what I mean? And I can still sit down and listen to, you know, the old albums that are still like a side of vinyl, 2 sides of vinyl, and that's the only reason they're split, you know what I mean? And that sort of thing is I don't think should be lost. I mean, one of the beauties about digital media as well, which not everyone seems to forget, is that it's endless in scope. It can also be as long as you want.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
And you can do amazing things with music you can never do in that sort of age. So it's
Do you feel that tug? Because I think it's there. I mean, I'm interested in that. The idea that albums have come about because that's what fitted on this particular thing, the 33 and so it was about 35 to 40 minutes long, and it sounded like that, about 10 songs, because this was what it was. Whereas now there's no blank canvas. And I wondered whether certain bands now are clinging very almost fearfully to this old format, and have yet not embraced the possibility that there might be other ways of putting your songs together to create a kind of story, if you like.
Maybe so. I mean, I think the important thing is when we were 14, 15, the internet hadn't taken over music yet, so we were still buying albums, and that's how our first introduction to music was, that you listen to the record because you paid for it and you want to get your money's worth.
And the Mercury Prize being a prize apparently for the best album seems also to be part of that. It's either a a desperate last fling clinging on to this idea, or a sign that it will be passed on, that the album itself is a very important, potentially work, as well as work of entertainment, work of art. This thing, it's an award that you've made the best album of the year. And is that another reason why it was a kind of uplifting nomination? Because it's about that. It's about having made the best album.
Yeah, definitely. Rather than singles, I think because it was supposed to cling together. The album was designed to have a flow and for things to kind of stick together and to juxtapose and to rub up against each other. And so that's taken into account is important for us. I mean, it's the thing about an album is you can choose whether you listen to it all or not. But it's designed that way for a purpose.
You've been aware of what they call the curse of the Mercury, and the possibility that if you do win, it's not necessarily a positive thing, and it might consign you to the dustbin of history. And have you been balancing that up between i.e., are you ready to win and deal with what that means in terms of expectation and sudden attention, etc.?
Well, I mean, all we're going to do after the Mercury Prize is to go and make another album, regardless of whether we win it or not. So it's kind of, I think it's as long as you don't get wrapped up in your own hype. It's I think that's very important. That it's an accolade, but it's nothing to do with what you're actually doing.
I'm of the ilk, if you'll take this in the right way, that I hope you don't win it. Yeah. Because I think it might alter your DNA, and being selfish about it. I'd like to see how you develop without this sudden blast of unnecessary attention and fuss, if you like.
Well, I mean, the good, I think it's done us a power of good already. I mean, I don't think we need any more propping up. You know what I mean?
The last thing I'd like to ask is simply a response to some of the interviews I've read you do, and the fact that when you talk about music that seems to have been important to you along the way, that it's a rather wonderful combination. It's like you've got the Cocteau Twins here, and then you've got like Bruce Springsteen here. And I just wonder if that also is something that dawned on you, the fact that you are trying to work out a place in the universe where you're very aware of these two things, and they both mean a lot to you, and somehow in the middle you're trying to find out how you can join the dots between these two strange things.
Well, I mean, also, as well as that, I mean, you're talking about something over here and something over here. I would also say it's in 4 dimensions, you know what I mean? There's all sorts of things all over the place, and we... I mean, this is part of what we're doing, is that we don't really think before us there was a music that was ours, and we're trying to kind of synthesize a lot of the stuff we've always liked and are still discovering into a viable form that is ours. You know what I mean? And incorporate it all, and not just try and ape stuff, but try and kind of take what we like of it and add to it, and and kind of whittle it down into something that only we would make at this time.
Yeah.
It's also really hard to put. It's just really hard and almost pointless to try and put it into words. It's just sometimes it just feels right, and a lot of the time I don't think we do know what we're doing, and that's the beauty of it. That's the thrill. Well,
precisely because in a way I'd like to hear where you get by the time you made your 8th album, and I think if you win your Mercury Prize you might not get to make an 8th album. I just want to wish you the worst of luck, and I hope you come a brave 5th. And Hayden and Tom, thanks very much indeed for
pleasure.
for coming in.
It's good to chat.